Draco Malfoy and the Truths of the Heart, where Draco will hear about this. Chapter 14. The Different Facets of Pain. No! He could hear Harry gasp, and he wanted to tell him to stop protesting. He would end up giving himself away, and then it would all be for nothing, and they would all be dead rather sooner than later. No, Draco! Draco! He could hear Harry struggling even when he was long gone from the room, could hear him call Draco's name from the hallway, but Draco knew with complete clarity that there was nothing Harry could do to help him. He looked up at his aunt and felt paralyzed with fear.
Meow!
Bellatrix hissed, moving closer until she was all up in Draco's face, wand digging into his chest.
Story time! Where did you get the sword?
We found it! Draco gasped.
Liar!
Bella yelled, and the sudden volume of her voice made it flinch.
Snape sent it to my vault in Gringotts.
It's the truth! Draco muttered, his voice shaky. We found it in the Forest of Dean. It was in the bottom of a lake, and...
Liar!
Bellatrix cut him off, and then she muttered,
Gossip!
Draco could hear his father yell in the background, but he could not make out the words, for the pain drove out everything else. He had been under the Cruciatus curse before, when not had lost his temper, but this, with his aunt aiming her wand at him, felt 100 times worse. Maybe it was because Bellatrix Lestrange was so cold-blooded in the face of causing others pain that she could focus the spell more purposefully, or maybe it was because his own magic recognized the blood connection between them. Whichever it was, the pain consumed him, and when she finally ended the spell, tears were streaming down his face, and he had trouble drawing in breaths from the way his chest was constricting. The ropes had cut into his flesh from his struggles, and blood was dripping down his wrists.
Willing to tell the truth now!
She hissed, and her thin fingers closed around Draco's throat, pressing down. Draco gasped for breath. Bellatrix! Lucius bellowed. That's enough!
You will not interfere, Lucius, or I swear to Salazar I will kill you along with him!
Bellatrix shot back.
And let's not kid ourselves, the Dark Lord wouldn't mind one bit! You've been nothing but a disappointment to him ever since he returned!
This is my house, Bella, Lucius warned. You don't give orders in my...
You have no authority over me, Lucius!
Bellatrix shouted, and then she pointed her wand at him and shot a stunning spell at him. It hit Lucius right in his chest, and he went down like a sack of potatoes. Apparently satisfied, she returned her attention to Draco.
Now, she hissed, how did you get into my vaults?
I didn't, Draco gasped out. We've never been to your vaults. We haven't seen the inside of Horcrux or Diagon Alley in months. I told you.
Still not willing to talk, are you?
She shook her head, and then the pain was back even worse than before, and Draco felt like he was drowning in it. He was going to die of this. He was sure of it. There was no way he would ever survive this. He would never see Harry again. When she canceled the spell for a second time, it took Draco a while to come back to himself. His senses were on overdrive, and his brain seemed to be unable to connect to single thought. His aunt, though, had no patience for such matters. When he didn't react to her questions right away, she slapped him across the face until he did, his eyes fluttering open to look at her.
How did you get in? She called. What else did you take?
We weren't there, Draco moaned. I swear we weren't there.
Of course you were,
Bellatrix shrieked.
The sword is proof. Tell me what else you took, or I swear I will bring that mudblood friend of yours up here and slaughter her while you watch!
And then the pain was back, and Draco wished that he wasn't bound so he could tear his limbs from his body just so that it would stop. He even screaming hurt, but he seemed to be unable to stop doing that either. He thrashed and hit his head against the stone floor, but he barely felt the pain, only being a background thought in the sea of all the other excruciating sensations he was experiencing. His ears were ringing when his aunt lifted the spell again. He felt disoriented. He couldn't connect anything he was feeling with actual thoughts anymore. It seemed like his brain had eclipsed in an attempt to protect itself from what was happening to him. His aunt was shaking him, and distantly he heard her talking to someone. Then she smacked him flat across the face. 1, 2, 3, 4 times until he stirred.
"You'd better not blink out on me," she sneered. "I'll have to kill you if you do. You're not used to me if you can't talk."
Draco just stared up at her, unsure what to respond to that.
"I just sent for the goblin," she informed him. "If this is the real sword of Godric Gryffindor, he'll be able to tell. And then we'll know you lied. So this is your last chance to tell me the truth."
"I told you the truth," Draco croaked. "We found the sword. We've never been to your vault." Her lip curled, but before she could respond, there were 2 sets of footsteps approaching them.
"I brought the goblin, Miss Bellatrix,"
Wormtail informed her in a manner more befitting a house elf than a wizard.
"You!"
Bellatrix snapped, dropping Draco to the floor and rounding onto the goblin.
"Look at the sword! Tell me if it's authentic or not!"
Draco closed his eyes, resigning himself to his fate. This was it. At least it was going to be over soon. But then, much to Draco's shock, he told Bellatrix, "That's a fake."
"Are you sure?" she hissed. "Quite sure."
"Rush," the goblin lied calmly, and Draco had no idea what was going on, what he had to gain from helping them. But he had no time to ponder the matter, because then Bellatrix turned back to him, her expression one of overwhelming relief.
"Good," she sighed. "And now we will talk about that boy down there who's been so desperately calling your name. Because, Draco dear, are you really going to tell me that isn't your boyfriend?"
Draco closed his eyes. Bloody hell, Harry had always predicted that Draco was going to die protecting him. "It's not him," Draco whispered, knowing full well it was no use but determined to die, clinging to that lie no matter what.
"You really are a stubborn one,"
she noted, sounding almost curious now.
"You know, we can just wait for whatever spell you put on him to wear off, right?"
Of course Draco knew. No matter what his aunt thought, he was far from stupid.
"I'm not a very patient woman, though," she sighed. "I so hate waiting, and I really don't think family members should keep secrets from each other anything. Don't you?"
Her wand was back, digging into Draco's throat this time, and he just stared up at her blankly.
"Shall we make a bet?" she whispered. "How long will it take you to break?"
And then the pain was back, and if possible, it was the worst wave yet. It seemed that Bellatrix was focusing all her energy into it this time, and Draco was sure that he was going to come apart by the seams, because surely that much pain couldn't be contained any longer. And then it was gone, and Draco was unsure how it had happened for long moments. There were shouting and flashes of light, which his mind did not recognize as spells, and then he was dragged into an upright position, and Bellatrix was holding a blade to his throat.
"Stop it, or it dies!" she shouted.
Draco blinked, and he could make out Harry back to his usual self, with Hermione, Weasley, and Yatten across the room. Wormtail was cowering not far from the wandless. His father was still out cold in a corner. Harry was staring at Draco with wide, horrified eyes, and he was slowly lowering the wand he was holding. Draco tried to shake his head. He wanted to tell Harry to just push on. Who cared what happened to him? But his head only lolled from one side to another, not quite listening to him. He felt strange, as if his brain was wrapped into a thick layer of cotton, and his body was very disconnected from it.
"Drop your wands," Bellatrix whispered. "Drop them, or your boyfriend's pretty head will come clean off."
"All right," Harry called, immediately dropping his wand onto the floor and holding up his bare hands to show that he was unarmed. Reluctantly, the others followed his example, and Wormtail scurried forward to pick up the wands. "There," Harry said. "Just don't hurt him."
"I'm afraid that's a promise I can't keep, Potter," she gaggled. "But it's okay. He'll watch you die, not the other way around."
Draco couldn't help the shudder running down his spine at that. This couldn't be happening, he thought desperately. After everything, it couldn't end this way. And then metal was jingling above them, and there was a sound of something being yanked from stone. Draco's fuzzy mind couldn't connect the noises to his surroundings, and only when he realized that everyone was looking upward did he too follow their eyes. Just in time to see the chandelier crashing down towards them! Bellatrix screamed and let go of him, throwing herself out of the way. Draco, though, was too slow to react. He would have been hit if familiar arms had not wrapped around him and pulled him aside at the last moment. Disoriented, Draco leaned into Harry, who clung to him, shielding him from the shards of crystal that had rained down all around them. Chaos had broken out again with the falling of the chandelier. Gatton and Weasley had recovered the wands from Wormtail, and Hermione warded them with a protection spell. Suddenly, they were all huddled around Draco and Harry. Only now, Draco realized that Dobby was amongst them and the goblin who was clutching the sword of Gryffindor. Bellatrix was yelling something, and then she was throwing the blade she had threatened Draco with towards them, but it bounced off on Hermione's shield charm, and then there was a pulling sensation around his navel, and the manor disappeared around them. When Draco opened his eyes again, it was to the scent of salt in the air, cold wind hitting his face, and Harry desperately calling his name. "Draco!" he cried, his voice hitching as he touched his cheek with gentle fingers, his other arm still firmly holding him to his chest. "Draco, please say something. Draco!" Draco gulped, trying to make his mind form words, but it still felt too blurry, and even if he found any, he wasn't sure they'd reach his tongue. So he reached up to cover Harry's hand with his instead, hoping it would be reassurance enough. All he got for his efforts was an anguished sob. "Harry, you should get him inside," a soft, pleasant voice said, one that was familiar and that he hadn't heard in a long time. Luna, where had she come from? "It's cold out here." "Can Dobby do anything for Draco Malfoy, Harry Potter, sir?" Dobby squeaked, and Draco could hear that he was fretting by the tone of his voice. "Dobby could go back and drop another chandelier on Miss Bellatrix." "You would do no such thing, Dobby." Hermione cut him off, her voice thin. "Luna is right, he needs to get one," Yatten said, leaning close to them as he spoke in Harry's ear. "Maybe that ilk could apparate you into that house, since he seems to be able to forego wards. You could take Grubhook, too, he's not in a good shape. The rest of us can walk." "Yeah," Harry agreed shakily, his thumb gingerly tracing a bruise on Draco's cheek. Draco didn't even have the energy to flinch. "Yeah, right. Dobby, can you get us up to Bill and Fleur's? I don't think Draco can make the way." "Of course, Harry Potter, sir," Dobby squeaked, and a moment later there was another pulling sensation around his navel as they moved locations once more. It left Draco feeling sick when they reappeared, and he was unable to sort through all the noises that surrounded him. People were talking, and there were more cracking noises, Dobby disappearing and reappearing again, this time with the goblin in tow. Draco was moved, and then there was a soft surface underneath him, and Harry was still stroking his hair back as a blanket was draped over him. "How long did she torture him?" someone asked. "I don't know," Harry asked, sounding despaired. "It seemed to go on forever." "Draco?" the voice said, and then someone shook his shoulder. "Draco, please open your eyes. Talk to me." It took all of Draco's willpower to tear his eyes open again and blink blurrily up at Bill Weasley. "Hi." Bill smiled at him, his scarred face worry-lined. "I'm sorry to keep you from your much-needed rest, but I need to make sure you're okay first. Can you tell me your name?" Draco gulped. Speaking seemed like an impossible task, but Harry and Bill were patient as he found the strength to open his mouth enough to slur out a barely comprehensible "Draco Malfoy." "That's it," Bill praised him. "Now, how old are you?" Draco closed his eyes again. Numbers were hard. They blurred into each other. 14, he settled on. There was a choked-out breath from Harry next to him. A moment of silence, then Bill asked, "Who am I, Draco?" Draco sighed, muttering, "Bill." "That's right. And who's this?" "Harry." He hoped that Bill was pointing to Harry because like hell was he opening his eyes again. "Okay, his brain doesn't seem to be permanently addled, but we can't really tell until he's rested. But I think you'll be alright." "Thank you, Bill," Harry whispered. Draco felt Harry's lips press against his forehead, and then he knew nothing more. When Draco opened his eyes next, it was dark and the mattress was shifting underneath him. He panicked for a moment, but then strong arms closed around him and he was drawn against a warm, familiar body. Draco relaxed again, resting his head on Harry's chest.
Sleep,
Harry whispered.
you need to rest.
And sleep Draco did. When he woke for the second time, his head was still pillowed on Harry's chest, but the sun had already come up, bathing the unfamiliar room into a soft, friendly light. Harry's breaths were soft and even, but when Draco moved just so to adjust his position, Harry's hand came up to card through his hair, telling Draco that he was wide awake.
Morning,
Draco croaked out.
Morning.
Harry muttered, pressing a kiss to the top of his head.
How are you feeling?
Draco took a moment to think about that. His brain seemed to be able to string thoughts together again, which was a good sign. He stretched tenderly and felt his muscles protest only feebly against the movement.
Sore,
he settled on.
but other than that, fine.
Good,
Harry breathed.
that's good.
He continued to hold Draco, making no haste to get up, and Draco closed his eyes, content to stay put for as long as he was allowed. They didn't get to do this often enough, he decided.
The others let us sleep in.
Harry told him eventually.
They said you should get as much rest as you need.
That's thoughtful, Draco muttered. Is everyone okay?
Yes,
Harry assured him.
Ollivander is pretty beaten up, and the goblin...
Ollivander? Draco asked, frowning. When did we pick up Ollivander?
He was in the dungeon with Luna. Dobby brought them to safety, together with Dean and Killian, before Ron, Hermione, Yatten, and I went to save you.
Well, looks like I missed quite a reunion, Draco sighed. Then again, I was attending my own reunion upstairs. Harry took in a sharp breath and his arms tightened around Draco. It made him want to take back his words.
Don't...
He started, his voice thin, before gulping and continuing.
Don't talk about what happened to you.
Draco stayed silent, unsure of how to proceed. Cynicism was his ghetto response, after all.
I guess it would be pointless to ask you to just stay here with Bill and Fleur and keep out of danger.
Harry asked, his tone small. You know the answer to that, Draco reminded him.
I know, but... Draco, this is the second time in a couple of months you almost died on me. And both times, it would have been my fault.
Salazar Harry,
Draco groaned. I'm too wrung out to play this game with you. I'm not going to indulge you trying to blame yourself for every harm that comes to us. Yes, something bad happened. We can't change it. We survived. Let's move on. It was obvious how unhappy Harry was with Draco's words in the lack of his reply. Draco sighed, but off. Listen, he huffed. I'm not going anywhere. So don't you dare ask me again to leave you, because I might actually scream if you do.
I have heard you scream enough in the past 24 hours,
Harry whispered.
I don't want to hear it again.
There you go, Draco grumbled. So drop it already, will you? No response again, and then Harry's arms tightened enough around Draco to be suffocating. But Draco didn't complain. He just let himself be held, knowing that this was what his boyfriend needed to heal the wounds the last night had inflicted upon him in turn. When they finally got up, it was because Draco's stomach was grumbling and Harry told him there was food in the kitchen. Bill and Fleur had put them up on the couch in the living room. It seemed like Ollivander and Griphook had taken the 2 guest rooms, and the rest of the house guests had slept all over the house on mattresses. Most of the house's temporary and permanent inhabitants were gathered in the bursting kitchen. Fleur was standing at the counter, preparing some kind of pastry, aided by a cheerful Killian. Bill, Yatten, Ron, and Hermione seemed to be in a deep discussion about something in the Daily Prophet, while Luna and Dean were drinking tea and debating over what appeared to be the existence of Nargles in this house. Or maybe at Malfoy Manor. It was hard to tell from a distance. Hermione was the first one to notice their arrival in the room, and she jumped to her feet instantly, her chair scraping over the wooden floor as she sprinted across the room to fly into Draco's arms. Whoa, easy there! Draco chuckled, swaying a little, but Harry's hand on his back held him steady. Maybe you should let me get some food before you try to knock me over? Sorry, Hermione breathed into his chest, and her voice sounded teary. God, Draco, I'm so glad to see you. Are you okay? Are you feeling only the slightest bit off? I'm fine, Hermione,
Draco smiled, patting her bushy head to calm her. I'm just hungry, really.
We saved the food for you,
Fleur told him briskly, interrupting Hermione's display of affection by procuring a plate of breakfast to beckon Draco with it.
Sit down and eat before you fall over.
Draco smiled at her gratefully and accepted the plate. Harry gently guided him into the nearest empty seat, which was the one next to Yetton's. Harry sat down next to him, and Hermione awkwardly hovered at his shoulder, apparently worried that he was going to have some sort of seizure should she return to her own chair. So, Draco asked as he dug into his food.
It was delicious!
Fleur had made French breakfast, meaning his plate was decked with slices of bread, cheese, and at the side, some fruit and a pains of chocolat. Draco felt like he was back at their own French estate. What else did I miss while I was out? Draco saw Harry exchange a gaze with Weasley, meaning that he would probably only get the official version here at the breakfast table. Well, better than nothing. I contacted your family, letting them know that you're safe. Bill offered. Narcissa sent her love. I also moved Mum, Dad, and Jenny to Muriel's last night. The Death Eaters are aware now that Ron has been on the run with Harry, after all, so it was time to put them out of danger. Dad won't be able to go to work, but it's probably better that way. It was only a matter of time anyway. Draco glanced sideways at Harry. He was staring at his hands, not meeting anyone's eyes. We'll keep the lot of you here for now, until we get Ollivander and Griphook sorted, and until we figured out where to best put you. Bill continued. We've been in contact with the Order, and we've been discussing safe houses.
We really appreciate everything that you do, Bill.
Killian smiled at him. Don't mention it. Bill waved him off. That's what the Order does. We watch out for each other.
Like Dumbledore's army, Luna piped up brightly. We've been doing the same thing in Hogwarts.
Right. Dean frowned. How's it been going? We heard stories about you and Jenny.
Oh, last I heard, everyone was doing fine,
Luna assured him.
The Carrolls are really strict, though. They are using unforgivables as punishment whenever we disobey them.
They what? Killian called, wide-eyed.
Yeah,
Luna shrugged.
They even made students use them on students. But it's not working as well as they hoped. Blaze and Pansy have been working from the inside at Slytherin House, destabilizing their morale.
Bless them. Yatten smiled. Knew there was something about them.
They were doing a good job while I was still there.
Luna smiled.
And the DA has been openly rebelling, trying to give people hope. A bit like Harry did for us in 5th year. They really have it in for some of us, though. Ryan, for example, and Ginny and Neville. It's probably good Ginny won't return after the holidays.
Not surprising about Ryan, Yatten sighed. He never knew when to keep his mouth shut. A bit stumped about Longbottom, though.
Oh, you should see him,
Luna breathed.
He's a real leader.
Draco felt in equal parts worried and proud at that news. He caught Luna's eyes as he asked, What about Eureka? Her smile fell a little.
I haven't heard from her since I was taken from the Hogwarts Express, she admitted. I hope she's okay.
We sent a message to Hogwarts through the Order, Bill told her in a kind voice. I'm sure she'll get it soon. Draco frowned and reached for the necklace he was wearing. He hesitated only for a moment before pulling it off and handing it to Luna. Put it on and think of her, he instructed. Then you should be able to see her. Luna's eyes widened as she reached out for the necklace. Over at the sink, there was a slight crash as Killian dropped a plate to the floor, looking frozen. Does this really work? He asked, sounding breathless. You can see anyone you want? Can I try too? Of course, Draco promised. You can all use it if you want. Killian's eyes seemed slightly watery at his answer, and Draco's heart ached for him. He thought he knew exactly who Killian so desperately wanted to see. Harry's hand reached out for Draco's knee as Luna, Killian, Dean, and Yatten all left the room to use the necklace in turn, looking for some privacy. That was kind of you, he whispered. Draco smiled at him. We all can relate to caring that deeply about people we're separated from due to this war, I think. Draco shrugged. Harry nodded. He was silent for a moment, then he muttered, Eat up. We'll need to talk in private after you did. Draco nodded. Hermione squeezed his shoulder in comfort.